So, good morning, student. Today, again, we are here with the series of ML lectures. And in today's lecture, we are going to see what are ROC curve. So, let us just understand what exactly are ROC curves. Now, imagine that you have two different probabilistic classification models, like you have logistic regression and you have neural networks, right? So, in this case, how would you know that which one is better, and how would you communicate your belief that whether logistic regression is better or neural networks is better? So is there anything that you can provide, like quantitative evidence beyond your gut feeling that yes, this one is better on the basis of subjective interpretation? So this is what exactly ROC curve is doing. So, in today's lecture, we are going to understand what exactly are ROC curves and why do we use them. So, stay tuned with me and keep on learning. So, basically, when we talk about ROC curves stands for Receiver Operating Characteristic Curve, which is a graphical plot that illustrates the diagnostic ability of a binary classifier system as its discrimination threshold is varied. Now, the method was originally developed for operators of military radar receivers starting in 1941, which led to its name. The ROC curve is created by plotting the true positive rate against the false positive rate at various threshold things. The true positive rate is also known as sensitivity, recall, or probability of detection in machine learning. Now, the false positive rate is also known as probability of false alarm and can be calculated as specificity. It can also be thought of as a plot of the power as a function of the type 1 error of the decision rule. When the performance is calculated from just a sample of the population, it can be thought of as estimators of these quantities. The ROC curve is thus the sensitivity of a recall as a function of fallout. In general, if the probability distribution for both detection and false alarm are known, the ROC curve can be generated by plotting the cumulative distributive function, the probability function from minus infinity to the discrimination threshold of the detection probability. ROC analysis provides tools to select possibly optimal models and to discard suboptimal ones independently from the cost context or the class distribution. ROC analysis is related in a direct and natural way to cost benefit analysis of diagnostic decision making, which we have already seen in the previous lecture. The ROC curve was first developed by electrical engineers and radar engineers during World War II for detecting enemy objects in battlefields and was soon introduced to psychology to account for perpetual detection of stimuli. ROC analysis since then has been used in medicine, radiology, biometrics, forecasting of natural hazards, meteorology, etc., and other areas for many decades and is increasingly used in machine learning and data mining research. The ROC is also known as a relative operating characteristics curve because it is a comparison of two operating characteristics as the criterion changes. Now, the ROC is also known as relative operating characteristic curve because it is a comparison of two operating characteristics, TPR and FPR, as the criterion changes. Now, to summarize, if used correctly, ROC curves are a very powerful tool as a statistical performance measure in detection and classification theory and hypothesis testing, since they allow having all relevant quantities in one plot. Now, a classification model is a mapping of instances between certain classes and groups because the classifier or diagnosis result can be arbitrary real value. The classifier boundary between classes must be determined by a threshold value, for instance, to determine whether a person has hypertension based on a blood pressure measure, or it can be a discrete class label indicating one of the classes. Now, to get an appropriate example in real world problem, consider a diagnostic test that seeks to determine whether a person has a certain disease. A false positive in this case occurs when the person tests positive but does not actually have the disease. A false negative, on the other hand, occurs when the person tests negative, suggesting they are healthy when they actually do not have the disease. Now, what is ROC space basically? The contingency table can derive several evaluation matrices. To draw a ROC curve, only the true positive rate and false positive rate are needed. The TPR defines how many correct positive results occur among all positive samples available during the test. FPR, on the other hand, defines how many incorrect positive results occur among all negative samples available during test. A ROC space is defined by FPR and TPR as x and y axis, respectively. which depicts relative trade-offs between true positive and false positive. Since TPR is equivalent to sensitivity and FPR is equal to 1 minus specificity, the ROC graph is sometimes called as the sensitivity versus 1 minus specificity plot. Each prediction result or instance of a confusion matrix represents one point in the ROC space. The best possible prediction method would yield a point in the upper left corner to coordinate 0, 1 of the ROC space, representing 100% sensitivity, no false negatives, and 100% sensitivity, no false positives. The 0, 1 point is also called as perfect classification. A random guess would give a point along a diagonal line, the so-called line of no discrimination, from the left bottom to the top right corners, regardless of the positive and negative base rates. An intuitive example of random guessing is a decision by flipping coins. As the size of the sample increases, a random classifier's ROC point tends towards the diagonal line. In the case of balanced coin, it will tend to the point 0.5 and 0.5. Strict interpretation considers the activation nonlinearity as a cumulative distribution function. The probabilistic interpretation led to introduction of dropout as a regularizer in neural network. The probabilistic interpretation was introduced by researchers including Hopfield, Widrow, and Narain, and popularized in surveys such as the one by Bishop. So, if we talk about deep neural network further, DNN can model complex non-linear relationship. DNN architectures basically, they generate compositional models where the object is expressed as a layered composition of primitives. The extra layers enable composition of features from lower layers, potentially modeling complex data with very fewer units that are than a similarity performing shallow network. For instance, it was proved that the sparse multivariate polynomials are exponentially easier to approximate with DNNs than with shallow networks. Now, deep architectures include many variants of a few basic approaches. Each architecture has found success in specific domains. It is not always possible to compare the performance of multiple architectures unless they have been evaluated on the same data sets. DNNs are typically feed-forward network in which the data flows from the input layer to the output layer without looping back. At first, the DNN creates a map of virtual neurons and assigns random numerical values or weights to connections between them. The weights and inputs are multiplied and return an output between 0 to 1. If the network did not accurately recognize a particular pattern, an algorithm would adjust the weights. That way, the algorithm can make certain parameters more influential until it determines the correct mathematical manipulation to fully process the data. The recurrent neural networks in which data can flow in any direction are used for applications such as language modeling, and LSTM, the long short term memory, is particularly it is effective for its use. Whereas convolutional deep neural networks are used in computer vision. CNNs also have been applied to acoustic modeling for automatic speech recognition or ASR. So let us now come over to the advantages part. So, see, the advantages says that it does feature extraction, no need for engineering features. Then moving towards raw features, it gives better optimization. and there is a a new level of noise robustness. It can work even in noise. Then multitask and transfer learning services are there, and it has got better architectures. Now, when we talk about the challenges part, what exactly is the challenges that they are facing? As you know, with ANNs, many issues can arise with naively trained DNNs. Two common issues are overfitting and computation time. Now, DNNs are prone to overfitting because of the added layer of abstraction, which allows them to model rare dependencies in the training data. Regularization methods such as evac and goes, unit pruning, or weight decay or sparsity can be applied during training to combat overfitting. Alternatively, dropout regularization randomly omits units from the hidden layers during training. This helps to execute or exclude rare dependencies. Finally, data can be augmented via methods such as cropping and rotating such that the smaller training sets can be increased in size to reduce the chances of overfitting. Now, the DNNs must consider many training parameters such as the size. Now, size is what? The number of layers and the number of units per layer, the learning rate and the initial weights. Sweeping through the parameter space for optimal parameters may not be feasible due to the cost in time and computational resources. Various tricks, such as batching, computing the gradient on several training examples at once rather than individual examples, speed up computation. Large processing capabilities of many core architectures, such as GPUs or the Intel Xeon Phi, have produced significant speed ups in training. Because of the suitability of such processing architectures for the matrix and vector computations. Alternatively, engineers may look for other types of neural networks with more straightforward and convergent training algorithms. CMAC is one such kind of neural network. Doesn't require learning rates of randomized initial weights for CMAC. The training process can be guaranteed to converge in one step with a new batch of data, and the computational complexity of the training algorithm is linear with respect to the number of neurons involved. Now, what are the real time applications? Automatic colorization of black and white images. This can be done with the help of deep neural network. Then automatically adding sounds to the silent movies. Even this is possible using deep neural networks. Then automatic machine translation. What is automatic machine translation? It can find out what different languages have written here, so it can convert this into a proper language. Then object classification and detection in photographs. It can identify by itself what all are the objects that are shown. Then automatic handwriting recognition. We have seen this thing, one example of it, that it can understand and it can recognize with the help of training samples. It can understand what have you written. Then automatic text generation can be there. Automatic image caption generation. Image captions can be given automatically. Automatically game playing is the example of deep neural network online chess playing, where one is the user itself and another one is the computer. So computer part is being played by deep neural networks. So what is the future scope? If we talk about the future scope, deep learning will speed search for extraterrestrial life. Robert, short for robotic exoplanet recognition for exoplanets that are beyond our solar system. So even it is, going to cover up for this. For astronauts, next steps on journey to space will be virtual. So even this is an example. Droughts and deep learning, measuring water where it is scarce and where it is abundant in nature. Even this can be judged out. So these are all the scopes and the application area of deep neural networks. So here we reach to the conclusion part, which says the low maturity of deep learning and its applications, such as large deep neural networks, achieve the best results on speech recognition, visual object recognition, and several language-related task fields warrants extensive future research. Nevertheless, the possibilities of deep learning in future are infinite, ranging from driverless cars to robots exploring the universe and to what not if the upcoming architectures are creative enough. These are the references that I have taken. I have even taken the reference from Wikipedia as well. The history part has been taken up from the Wikipedia, and some of the interpretation part has been taken up by Wikipedia. So even you can go through these references to know more about deep learning networks. So this is about the complete lecture of deep learning today. I hope this is clear. The history has been clear. The purpose is clear. What exactly is deep neural network concept? We have seen this thing. What are the technologies that it uses? So I think we have come to an end of deep learning here. Now I'm going to quickly share with all of you the MCQ part here, so that you can judge yourself that whatever you have learned it thoroughly. So let me quickly share with you the MCQs. So these are the MCQs that you are going to cover up today. So quickly go through it and try to answer. Now here, question number one says, which of the following is a subset of machine learning? Is it NumPy? Is it SciPy, deep learning, or all of the above? The second question asks you how many layers deep learning algorithms are constructed. Is it 2 layer, 3 layer, 4 layer, or 5 layer? And the first layer is called the inner layer, outer layer, hidden layer, or none of the above. So I hope everything is very already clear to you, so you are able to quickly identify the things. So try to answer quickly. So I hope these three questions are already clear to you. Let me take you to the next set of questions. RNN stands for. What do you think RNN stands for? Quickly try to answer. We have just seen it is one of the technology that it uses other than convolutional networks. Now I hope you were able to answer the question here. Let me take you to the next set of questions. Number 5 and 6. Which of the following is or are common uses of RNN, recurrent neural network? Businesses help security traders to generate analytic reports, detect fraudulent credit card transactions, provide a caption for images, or all of the above. And the next question is, which of the following is well suited for perpetual tasks? Feed forward neural networks, recurrent neural networks, convolutional neural networks, reinforcement learning? Try to answer it quickly. Now, I hope you were able to answer question number 5 and 6. Let me take you to question number 7 and 8. CNN is mostly used when there is an structured data, unstructured data, both A and B, or none of the above. And question number 8 says, which neural network has only one hidden layer between the input and the output? Do we call it shallow neural network? Is it deep neural network, feed-forward neural network, or recurrent neural networks? Let me take you to the next set of questions, question number 9 and question number 10. Which of the following is limitation of deep learning? Is it data labeling, obtain huge training data sets, both A and B, or none of the above? And question number 10 says, deep learning algorithms are dash more accurate than machine learning algorithms in image classification. The 33%, 37%, 40%, and 41%. Try to answer this quickly. So I hope you were able to answer all these questions correctly in this MCQ. So with this, I hope in today's deep learning neural network lecture, you were able to understand what exactly is the concept of deep learning and how we can work with deep neural network. What are the challenges? What all are the technologies and the advantages, disadvantages of deep learning network? We have seen all of them. I hope all of these things are clear to you. And in case if you have any kind of queries, you can just post your questions and your queries in the comment section to get get answered. So till then, I'll be coming over with few more important concepts of machine learning in my coming lectures. So please stay tuned and keep learning. Thank you. Once again, a very good morning to all of you. And here I am back with lecture number 21 of machine learning. Today, this is a very interesting topic that we people are going to take. It is actually called the random forest. So In today's lecture, we are going to understand what exactly is random forest. So stay tuned with me and keep on learning as we are going to cover up this very efficient algorithm in machine learning, which is based on classification techniques. So keep on learning and stay tuned. So I hope this one is visible to all of you. So we are going to understand this new algorithm that is random forest, and it is not a very new algorithm. It has been working out since classification data mining was introduced. So from that time only it is coming. So here, let us see what exactly are the objectives of this tutorial. We'll see the tree representation. We'll see brief information theory. We'll be learning decision trees. Then we'll see the concept of bagging. And finally, we'll see what exactly is random forest. So these will be the objectives of today's lecture. Now, when we talk about random forest, it is a flexible and it is easy to use machine learning algorithm that produces, even without hyperparameter tuning, great result most of the time. It is also one of the most used algorithms because of its simplicity and diversity. It can be used for both the classification and the regression task. Now, as we have seen, what exactly is random forest? So let us understand that random forest is a supervised learning algorithm. The forest it builds is an ensemble of decision trees, usually trained with the bagging method. So the general idea of bagging method is that a combination of learning models increases the overall result. So let us see that how this random forest works first of all. So, as I've told you, that random forest is a supervised learning algorithm. The forest it builds, as I told, that it is an ensemble of decision trees, which is usually trained with the bagging method. So the general idea of bagging method is that combination of learning model increases the overall result. Now, putting it down very simply, random forest builds multiple decision trees and it merges them together to get a more accurate and stable prediction. Now, one big advantage of random forest is that it can be used for both classification and regression problems, which form the majority of current machine learning systems. Now, let's look at the random forests in classification, since the classification is sometimes considered the building block of machine learning. Now, because it is related to decision trees, we have already known what decision trees are. They are non-linear classifiers. They are easy to use. They are easy to interpret. They are susceptible to overfitting, but it can be avoided at times. So here you can see the anatomy of decision tree. So what do we do here? The blue, diamond shape that you're seeing, they are considered to be nodes, and here each node is a test on one attribute. So after you are testing, there are possible attribute values of the nodes that we can see, like for outlook we can have sunny, overcast, or rain. And finally, the terminal nodes that you are seeing, terminal nodes, like they are colored from pink and yellow. You can see these leaf nodes. They are called leaf nodes, or the external nodes, or you can say the terminal nodes, which are terminating a given tree. So they have the decisions, like humidity, in that you can see no or yes. Even in windy, you can see no or yes. So these are the decisions made by the decision tree. So this is how the decision trees actually work. They make the decision at the end on the terminal nodes. So a random forest has nearly the same hyperparameters as a decision tree or a bagging classifier. But fortunately, there's no need to combine a decision tree with a bagging classifier, because you can easily use the classifier class of random forest. Now with the random forest, you can also deal with regression tasks by using algorithms regressor. Now, see, the random forest adds additional randomness to the model while growing the trees. Instead of searching for the most important feature while splitting a node, it searches for the best feature among a random subset of features. Now, this results in a wide diversity that generally results in a better model. Now, therefore, in random forest, only a random subset of features is taken into consideration by the algorithm for splitting a node. You can even make the trees more randomly by additionally, using random thresholds for each feature rather than searching for the best possible thresholds like a normal decision tree does. So here, understand that what is the real life analogy. Now, let's say that Andrew wants to decide where to go during 1 year vacation. So he asks the people who know him best for suggestions. The first friend he seeks out asks him about the likes and the dislike of his past travels. Now, based on the answers, he will give Andrew some advice. Now, this is a typical decision tree algorithm approach. Andrew's friend created rules to guide his decisions about what he should recommend by using Andrew's answers. Now, afterwards, Andrew start asking more and more of his friends to advise him, and they again ask him different questions they can use to derive some recommendations from. Finally, Andrew chooses the places where recommend the most to him, which is a typical random forest algorithm approach. So here, what is the feature importance? See, another great quality of random forest algorithm is that it is very easy to measure the relative importance of each feature on the prediction. sklearn provides a great tool for this that measure features importance by looking at how much the tree nodes that use the feature reduce impurity across all the trees in the forest. Now it computes this score automatically for each feature after training and scales the results so the sum of all importance is equals to 1. Now, if you don't know how a decision tree works or what a leaf or node is, here is a good description from Wikipedia that in a decision tree, each internal node represents a test on an attribute. Example, whether a coin flip comes up heads or tails. So each branch represents the outcome of the test, and each leaf node represents a class label. So decision taken after computing all attribute, right? So a node that has no child is a leaf node. As I have already told you, it is called terminal node or a leaf node. Now, by looking at the feature importance, you can decide which features to possibly drop because they don't contribute enough or sometimes nothing at all to the prediction process. Now, this is important because a general rule in machine learning is that the more features you have, the more likely your model will suffer from overfitting and vice versa. Now, let us understand what is the difference between decision trees and random forest. Now, while random forest is just a collection of decision trees, there are some differences, right? Now, if you input a training data set with features and labels into a decision tree, it will formulate some set of rules which will be used to make the predictions. For example, to predict whether a person will click on an online advertisement, you might collect the ads the person clicked on in the past and some features that describe his/her decision. Now, if you put the features and labels into a decision tree, it will generate some rules that help predict whether the advertisement will be clicked or not. In comparison, the random forest algorithm randomly selects observations and features to build several decision trees and then average the results. Now, another difference is deep decision trees might suffer from overfitting. Now, most of the time, random forests prevent this by creating random subsets of the features and building smaller trees using those subsets. Afterwards, it combines the subtrees. Now, it's important to note this doesn't work every time, and it also makes the computation very slower. So, depending on how many trees the random forest builds. Now, what are the important hyperparameters here? See, the hyperparameters in random forest are either used to increase the predictive power of the model or to make the model faster. Now let's look at the hyperparameters of the sklearns built in random forest function. Number one is the increasing the predictive power. Now firstly, there is the n estimators hyperparameter, which is just the number of trees the algorithm builds before taking the maximum voting or taking the average of predictions. In general, a higher number of trees increases the performance and makes the prediction more stable, but it also slows down the computation. Now, another important hyperparameter is max features, which is the maximum number of features the random forest considered to split a node. Now, sklearn provides several options, all described in the documentation. The last important hyperparameter is minimum sample leaf. This determines the minimum number of leaves required to split an internal node. The second one is increasing the model's speed. So the njobs hyperparameter tells the engine how many processor it is allowed to use. If it has a value of 1, it can only use one processor. A value of -1 means that there is no limit. The random state hyperparameter makes the model's output replicable. The model will always produce the same results when it has a definite value of random state and if it has been given the same hyperparameters and the same training data. Lastly, there is the OOB score, also called OOB sampling, which is a random forest cross validation method. Now, in this sampling, about one third of the data is not used to train the model, and can be used to evaluate its performance. So these samples are called the out of bag samples. It is very similar to the leave one out cross validation method, but almost no additional computational burden goes along with it. So, take an example with my So how do we choose the test here? Which attribute should be used at the test? We have seen all these things. Now, let us see the advantages and disadvantages of random forest. Now, one of the biggest advantages of random forest is its versatility. It can be used for both regression and classification tasks, and it's also easy to view the relative importance it assigns to the input features. Now, random forest is also a very handy algorithm because the default hyperparameter it uses often produce a good prediction result. Now, understanding the hyperparameters is pretty straightforward, and there's also not that many of them. Now, one of the biggest problems in machine learning is overfitting, but most of the time this won't happen thanks to the random forest classifier. If there are enough trees in the forest, the classifier won't overfit the model. The main limitation of random forest is that a large number of trees can make the algorithm too slow and ineffective for real-time predictions. Now, in general, these algorithms are fast to train, but quite slow to create predictions once they are trained. A more accurate prediction requires more trees, which results in a slower model. In most real-world applications, the random forest algorithm is fast enough, but there can certainly be situations where runtime performance is important and other approaches would be preferred. Of course, random forest is a predictive modeling tool and not a descriptive tool. Meaning, if you are looking for a description of the relationships in your data, other approaches would be better. Now, what are the use cases of random forest? See, the random forest algorithm is used in a lot of different fields like banking, the stock market, medicine, and e-commerce. In finance, for example, it is used to detect customers more likely to repay their debt on time or use a bank's services more frequently. Now, in this domain, it is also used to detect fraudsters out to scam the bank. In trading, the algorithm can be used to determine a stock's future behavior. In the healthcare domain, it is used to identify the correct combination of components in medicine and to analyze a patient's medical history to identify diseases. Now, random forest is used in e-commerce to determine whether a customer will actually like the product or not. Whereas the summary here, random forest is just a great algorithm to train early in the model development process. To see how it performs, it simply makes building a bad random forest a tough proposition. The algorithm is also a great choice for anyone who needs to develop a model quickly. On top of that, it provides a pretty good indicator of the importance it assigns to your features. Now, random forests are also very hard to beat performance-wise. Of course, you can probably always find a model that can perform better, like a neutral network, for example. But these usually takes more time to develop, though they can handle a lot of different feature types like binary, categorical, and numerical. Now, overall, if we talk, the random forest is very fast, simple, and flexible tool, but no, and not without some limitations. So here you have seen these are the some feature selection that I'm going to cover in the next lecture. This is information gain, entropy, what is purity here, what is conditional entropy, information gain, example that we have seen. I'm going to cover up these already. So these are the trees as you can see, this decision trees. Here you can see what how we are merging them up to find a random forest. This is how we can do.